All right, folks, using information technology for fraud examination and financial forensics. Um, Again, the authors go back and forth between forensic accounting and financial forensics. Um, the As I say, the AICPA has a particular certificate in financial forensics, which I have, and and so that term you hear a lot, and as I say, the authors go back and forth with that. So here we go. Okay, this is from uh, Mark Negrini, um, and who is I've seen speak and met him several times at different conferences. Smart guy. On IT technology, fraud examination, and financial forensics. He talks about, and the essay is in the chapter. Talks about rule-based compliance auditing, okay, and rule-based fraud detection, forensic accounting to identify and detect such things as ghost employees, collusive bidding, and conflicts of interest. Using reasonableness tests on client supplied reports, and then using statistical sampling where auditors applied an audit procedure to a sample, such as account balances or a class of transactions, and then evaluates the results, such as calculating a projection of the total misstatement. Internal auditors and specialist accounts, internal auditors and specialist accounts payable auditors identified duplicate payments made by account payable personnel. Okay, those are very often things that CPAs, auditors, fraud examiners, those in financial forensics do. Okay. And all of those things can benefit from the use of IT. And specifically, the thing we talk about now, artificial intelligence, AI, and maybe some of you saw in the news the other day, our Secretary of Education, Secretary McMahon, was at a conference and a couple of times referred to AI as A1. And so they were making jokes how she was talking about, putting steak sauce in the classrooms, which is a good thing. I kind of like A1 steak sauce. Anyway, how will artificial intelligence impact accounting? Well, by some predictions, bookkeepers have a 97.6% chance of losing their jobs as machines take over number crunching and data analysis. Well, that's not good, but that's okay. You're not learning to be bookkeepers, you're learning to be accountants. A bit different. But AI is already beginning to automate tedious tasks such as data entry. AI will increase our audit quality as it begins to allow us to ask a lot more questions. That's often the frustrating thing about auditing is we can't do it just because, and when I say AI, sometimes it crosses over into data analytics. Getting the data, capturing the data, and then analyzing is costly, or has been in the past been costly and difficult to compute. But now we can analyze it beautifully and quickly. And it improves efficiency in what we do, and it'll provide more insight. So the modules for this chapter start with module 1, which introduces digital concepts associated with forensic accounting and fraud examination. Then in module 2, we're going to drill down deeper into that, into digital evidence, including sources of evidence and the need to properly collect and protect electronic evidence in a manner admissible to courts of law. I mean, it's great to use our AI techniques and all and get all sorts of good, information and evidence. But if you don't do it properly, that judge in that courtroom is going to not allow it to be heard by the jury or not allow it to be considered by he or she as the judge. So you got to do it right. Module 3 explores the methodologies for detection and examination in a digital environment. Module 4 outlines graphical tools and techniques. And then Module 5, we're going to consider the tools and techniques for case management. Again, if especially in a complicated case, you got to be able to, manage all this data that's flying at you. So let's talk about Module 1, digital environment. Technology is a specialized area. As a result, the auditor, fraud examiner, or forensic accountant may need to solicit the assistance of a professional. Okay, and remember the old saying about any kind of data, even at the very beginnings of the computer renaissance, garbage in, garbage out. So you have to maintain data integrity or it's just pointless. You must be able to prove the origins of data and the credibility of data. And recall, especially, again, going back to the root of the word forensic for forensic accounting, it's the idea that you're doing accounting for the purposes of presenting in a forum. Forensic comes from forum, or specifically a courtroom. So you have to always, be cognizant of that, and the court will only accept that information if you can show where did this come from and is this data credible. All right, now because of that, we talk about IT controls. Many of the process controls applicable to a paper-based information system are analogous to the internal controls surrounding digital information systems. And that makes sense because you have to build on something. So when digital systems are developed, you look back at that paper-based system to give you an idea of how to develop it. So information technology, and in case you don't already use the term, the abbreviation IT, an IT audit consists of planning, which we have to do. Again, clients sometimes get frustrated because it seems you're spending all this time in planning, you're not doing anything. Planning is part of it, and it's valuable, and you don't want to rush into something without adequate planning. Then you test the controls, and then you make your substantive testing, just as we would for a paper-based audit. So the general framework for reviewing IT risks and controls, we look at the IT operations. We look at data management systems. And then, they're constantly improving and developing new systems and integrating new apps and such into the system. How do they do that? How do they maintain the system? And what's so very important, do they have adequate system backup and contingency planning? Okay, I just saw a headline as I was starting. Apparently, there's a massive power outage on the island of Puerto Rico right now, and you wonder, all the companies down there, did they have adequate contingency plans if that were to occur? One thing that a lot of, kind of a good thing that the pandemic from a couple of years ago has taught a lot of businesses is they have to have good contingency planning. And sadly, you often see this only after disaster, such as when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. There were businesses there that were wiped out because they kept all of their records in storage areas in basements of buildings that got destroyed by the waters. So do you have the system backups? Do you have the contingency? I know at the Board of Elections, we've been doing a lot of work since the pandemic to make sure that we, that, my goodness, the pandemic was declared like 2 days before the primary election in Illinois. So we you know we were ready for it. A lot of jurisdictions weren't, and we have to be prepared for that in the future. And then we have to look at electronic commerce, which we know has totally changed the face of commerce. And then who has control over our computer operations and how is it done? So continuing with the overview, talk about big data. Okay, we've got every day, every moment, we're generating huge amounts of data. What can we do with it? Okay, and can we benefit from it? And that's where data analytics comes in, using apps to get into that big data and have it benefit us. And then computer aided audit tools and techniques known as CAT. Okay, so we're going to use the power of computers to help us conduct our audits. Now, for all of applications, we have to have appropriate application controls, such as, with source documents, data coding controls, batch controls, validation controls, record validation, and examination of application input systems. Then we have the processing controls to ensure that processed data maintains its integrity as it moves within the system or through the system. Then our output controls, including spooling, which most of us encounter when we're trying to, print something out and tells us that it's spooling. Print programs and bursting, monitoring waste, and then always important, identify responsibility. Okay. Now then, if you have a data system and you've been told, okay, this company has been using as an IT system, and now you've been hired to audit it. How do you audit it? Well, there is the black box approach, which I think historically we don't encounter this too much anymore. But I will tell you, having been at this for a while, back in the 70s and 80s, corporations like, okay, we're going to get into this computer stuff, maybe late 60s and 70s. And they would bring in the computer scientists and computer engineers, and they would set up, enterprise data collection systems that, and I will tell you one audit I went on, it was wonderful. And this was a big Fortune 500 corporation. And they had this huge computer system. They brought in these engineers. Unfortunately, they did not bring in the accountants and the auditors when they were designing that computer program. And as a result, all of this accounting data just went into the black box, into this big data system, and then it generated the final reports. Here is your balance sheet, your income statement. Boom, boom, boom. Great. Can we trace those numbers back through other things? Well, no, you can't. It just all goes in one door and then it comes out as the reports. Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. It was a bear to audit because you don't know what's going on inside that black box. Again, fortunately, most companies will not put in or implement an IT system like that anymore. Okay, they will consult with the accountants and the auditors to make sure that they can audit the numbers as they go through the system. Otherwise, you do not know about the integrity of the amount. So if you have the black box approach, well, first you develop an understanding of the system, and then you test the integrity of data and system. One is to have what's called a test deck. And you may have encountered that in your audit classes, where you have a set of data that you enter into the system, and then you see, does it come out the way you expect it to come out? And you test it. But that's a very weak way of testing, because maybe it works for that data, but maybe the next set of data it won't work. And then you have to go back and reverse out all those transactions. So black box approach, as I say, fortunately, in your careers, you may never have to encounter that. More likely the white box approach, where the IT system was set up so you can trace transactions through the system, okay? And they call it the white box approach because it's opposite of black. It's more of a transparent box approach, if you will. So you can trace transactions through it. You can determine authenticity. You can test for accuracy, completeness, redundancy. You have a nice audit trail you can access, okay? And you even have rounding error tests that can be performed. So, as I say, fortunately, all of you in your careers will probably be involved with as I say, I prefer the transparent box approach. So the problem, of course, with any sort of IT system is collusion with those IT people. Well, let's face it, they're a squirrely bunch to begin with. No. I say that only because I have a brother who's a big IT person. So the IT system personnel may be colluding to conceal fraud, or maybe they're just doing it on their own. But the big scandals we've seen is sometimes, someone in, say, the accounting department colluding with the IT person so that the fraud can go on, and it never generates any kind of suspicious numbers. Few understand information technology. We rely, some might say maybe too much, on the IT professionals. It's like, we don't need to know about what goes on inside the machine. Just as you might not know how your car works, except you put the key in the ignition, you turn it, and you put your foot on the gas, and it goes. After that, if something goes wrong, you have a mechanic take care of it. And increasingly, they're dealing with electronics, right? So few understand IT. As a result, you have little problems such as an IT professional who can substitute inappropriate versions of software to alter the data. And so your IT auditor must be able to ensure that the entire control environment is examined. Many years back, there was a big scandal of a IT professional working for a large bank. And, if you have various accounts at the banks, savings accounts and such, they earn interest. And so he went in and swapped out the app that computed the interest on everybody's account. And what it would do is, make the calculation and then truncate it, cut it off. So if it was, if the interest for the month was $37.94.5, okay, he'd have that half cent placed into a special secret account in the system. which he alone could access. Now you might think, okay, he stole half a cent. Now, this was a very large bank with hundreds of thousands of accounts. And so each month you've got, and this was, and interest was computed daily. So there was a lot of half pennies going into this guy's secret account. And that's how he was ripping them off. Any event, done by going in and substituting the software, or at least, or changing the software. And this is why we need controls as to access to the system. Okay, digital evidence. So you've got a fraud going on, and you need to present the evidence in court, or maybe before a hearing of some sort with a regulatory agency, the SEC or whatever. Okay, you have to make sure that that evidence is admissible. So, as it points out here, files and documents can easily be given misleading or coded names. I mean, how many times have you created a file and you labeled it something, and then you go back to look for it, and you don't remember what you called it, and it's, you think you have it and you got the wrong thing. Well, in any event, okay, so files and documents can be, essentially hidden by giving misleading or coded names, and words that might be expected to occur in pertinent documents can be encrypted. We hide good stuff. Agents and prosecutors in white-collar crime examinations need to tread carefully when using a search warrant to gather evidence. If you take the business law course, I think we touch upon this a little bit, but search warrants, judges generally will not give you a very sweeping search warrant. They will give you a warrant that is restricted to that which is reasonable in the circumstances. So when using a search warrant, you have to first present a good warrant to the judge, one that will allow you to gather the digital evidence that you need. So although a treasure trove of materials can be obtained this way, failing to pay attention to the details of properly writing and executing a warrant can have devastating consequences for a case. More than one case has failed because they went in and grabbed up all sorts of data, and maybe the data they had is damning. But then the defense attorney says, whoa, we're looking here at the language of the search warrant that was approved by the judge, and what they gathered doesn't fit the description in the warrant, and therefore it has to be thrown out. So you have to, if you are involved in a case, work with your IT people, work with the attorneys, so that you don't get into a situation where your entire case fails because you either didn't get the information you need, or you got it, but it was outside the restrictions of the warrant. So, digital evidence. Try this again. Digital evidence analysis helps you sift through, organize, and analyze large amounts of evidence. Again, I can go back to days where you were sifting through evidence. I had one case where we got the entire file room, and I'm talking a large room with lots of file cabinets. And we had a team of lawyers and paralegals just going through drawer after drawer of paper documents, looking at each and every one, trying to see if there's anything in it that would be useful. Talk about your needle in the haystack, and talk about gross inefficiency, if you will. Okay, the amount of time and labor and that was used to do that. But now, instead of having a file room full of paper documents, you have servers that has a lot of this information on it. Both the numbers and stuff and images and all sorts of other good stuff. Okay, um, now we can use data analytics to, as I say, sift through, organize, analyze. Um, but you have to know how to do that, right? Um, and you can do that with incredible speed and accuracy, right? Because if you go through, you have a team of attorneys going through file cabinets. Speed, no, takes a long time. Accuracy, well, after you've gone through file cabinets for a couple of hours, who knows if your eyes are catching the relevant evidence that you're looking for. Okay. Electronic imaging is, you know, is wonderful. Again, I go back to running a company that made microfilm. That was what was used. That was uh, the high end of imaging in its day. Essentially, taking a photograph of documents and putting it, on a very high resolution, tiny piece of film. And now we can, as you know, we have electronic image uh, capture and retrieval, which is so important. Uh, the whole field of computer forensics, and that goes into the analysis of all of this data that you have. And um, again, in order to access the data, so I mean, let's say a number of my students have gone on to work in the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigations Division, though I saw in the news last night they're laying off a lot of folks. Sadly, some of my students may be getting laid off. But say they're looking for evidence of tax evasion at a big corporation. Well, okay, well, you have to go in there and get a judge to issue a warrant that allow them to go in and take that data. And if it's a operating company, they don't want to shut the company down. They go in and they get they copy all that data so they can then analyze it. Well, make sure that you have a warrant or a subpoena. A warrant is more for a criminal case, but a subpoena can be used in criminal cases as well. But subpoenas would be in a civil case. Make sure you have the one that's you get it. You get the approvals in order to get that data evidence. And again, we are looking for probable cause. You have to convince the judge that you have probable cause to believe that the data you need to prosecute the case is in there. Again, initial acquisition, if it's a criminal case especially, you may see these every now and then when the feds go for a evidence sweep or execute one of these search warrants. It's a big enough case. Sometimes they'll bring along members of the news media, and or even fraud professors. I've gone along on some raids myself, and because of the type of this being important data in an electronic environment, the feds will walk into the computer room, into the accounting department, what have you, and the first thing they will say is, everybody back away from your desk and put your hands up in the air. Because they don't want anyone entering a code to start erasing files. And so, they identify themselves as being federal agents, back away from the computers. And it's very dramatic. And if you've seen it in a movie or a television show, yeah, it's pretty much how it goes down. So you need that initial acquisition of the data. And then once you have it, you have to maintain appropriate chain of custody logs. So you must maintain good work papers that back it all up. All right. Now then, when gathering evidence, and the authors talk about these two particular software suites, and there are a couple of others out there, and of course they're always developing new ones, but these are two really good ones. Excuse me, Roadmaster. And I tell you, when you go and you watch some of these forensic folks do their work, it is impressive. I think I told you the story of the forensic guys who went into this guy's office and were told, "Oh, you'll never get into his computer. He's got, passwords. It's all password protected." And they were in his computer in like 15 seconds. But Roadmaster, good, sweet. It's a portable computer forensic lab. Again, because so very often, they don't bring the data to you. You have to go and fetch it. It's used to acquire and analyze electronic data, preview and image hard drives, and then completely remove and erase stored files and programs from hard drives, if necessary. But what you really want to do usually is capture that, and get the, capture all the data on your own drives. And then encase, good for investigating and analyzing data in multiple platforms, identify information despite efforts to hide, cloak, or delete data, and manage large volumes of computer evidence. That middle bullet point is good. Yeah, the bad guys are going to try and hide the evidence or delete the evidence. But remember, just because you hit delete doesn't mean it really goes away. It's there, just not labeled. And systems like, or apps like Encase will find it. Good stuff. So comes the next question: how do you recover those deleted files? Again, deleted files are not removed from the hard drive. At least they're not removed until they're written over again. Okay, but usually that's not going to be for a while, if at all. So, as it says, until the computer reuses the space where the file resided, the data is still, the data in the file will remain intact. It's just, as I say, has had its label removed. The analogy is always, again, going back to that file room full of file cabinets. And so you got all these cabinets full of reports and paperwork, and then you go up to one of the cabinets and you take the label off the front of the file cabinet drawer. Now, if somebody goes into that room looking for a particular file and there's no label on the drawer, they wouldn't open up the drawer. It's unlabeled. But the file is still in there, still in that file cabinet, and it'll remain in there until they need to use that drawer, and they open it up and go, "Oh, look, somebody left some stuff in here. Here, take it out and shred it. We'll put the new, stuff in here." That's what deleting a file does. It doesn't remove the information that's in the file. It simply takes the label off of the front of the drawer. And until later they come along and reuse that space, it's still there. Okay. They very often, people don't do this enough on their computers. Not long ago, you had to do this all the time, just because, especially laptops or even small personal computers didn't have a lot of storage. So you had to constantly defrag. Now what that does is reorganize your hard drive for more efficient data storage. And if you're trying to hide something, it may make deleted files unrecoverable. Okay, depending on which operation it works. But generally, if you have deleted a lot of stuff that you don't want somebody else seeing, whether that's be the criminal investigators or your spouse, whatever, you might want to run a defrag on your computer. And there's wonderful stuff out there, Undelete software, which will search for clues as to the location of disk space where deleted files reside. Okay, so it'll go through your hard drive and say, there's a space over here that looks a little sus. It's probably with them deleted files in there. And then, examine unallocated disk space and say, hey, what, look what's in here. Okay, good stuff. All right. So how do you recover those deleted emails? Again, emails are forever. Well, unless you really do a good wipe on your files. Of course, you put something on the internet, that is forever. About every week there's a case of somebody put something embarrassing or scandalous on Twitter, now called X, and then they go back and delete it. Too late. It's out there. Somebody else has got it, and it's going to come back and haunt you. So emails are stored in mail folders. Each folder is considered a separate file. Prior to compaction, deleted emails may be recovered using software. So now, again, once they're compacted, you can lose it. But just because you deleted an email doesn't mean it's not still out there on a hard drive. And there's specific software out there that forensic accountants and investigators use that can recover those emails. E-discovery rules require organizations to provide electronic files going back in time. So, probability of deleted email recovery is greatly enhanced. I know in my role as election commissioner, every now and then we will get a subpoena. They want each and every email dealing with this particular topic. Let's say a contractor thinks that we, did them wrong in some way, and they want to prove there's a conspiracy going on. Okay, so subpoena all the emails dealing with this particular contract, and so I get served it, and I go, okay, and I can have somebody go through my computer and say, hey, I never had any emails on this contract. So, but get a subpoena or a warrant, but it will ask for all of the emails regarding whatever particular topic or time span or what have you, and you have to go back and search for it and then provide it in order to comply with the subpoena, because if you don't, guess what? You could be held in contempt of court for defying a properly executed subpoena. Okay, how do you restore data? And it's the systems for this are always getting better, and it's almost scary. Okay. Restoring lost files under more challenging circumstances. It's this cat and mouse game. You can delete things, and then we develop software to recover it. So then we've come up with new ways of deleting so make it, you can't recover it, but then they come up. It's constantly going back and forth. So. Such as stop writing to drive to increase the probability of recovering data. Okay, so if there's a drive, you prevent it. As I say, you can delete a file on a hard drive, but the data is still there. until it's written over. So if you stop any additional writing on the drive, boom, higher probability you'll be able to recover that deleted data. High security or privacy software make the chance of restoring files non-existent. So again, in this cat and mouse game, we've developed high security or privacy software that once it's deleted, it's gone. There is the possibility of manual restoration, where somebody sits down and goes through every little bit of storage on a hard drive. And at that point, you have to wonder, is it worth the cost? Okay, module 3, detection and examination in the digital environment. Okay, as I say, we must have an understanding of what could go wrong. We need to follow a targeted approach. So we have, we have these terms, right? Flat file. It's beautiful. It's sequential. It's indexed. There are hashes in there, okay, every now and then to see the data is, integrity is there, and pointer files. Okay, beautiful. Okay, you can also have the files arrayed as a hierarchical and network database, where you have this relational connection between the entire network of systems. And then they also talk about the rifle shot approach. And I'm going to leave that up to you to read about, because frankly, I just forgot what that is a reference to. I'm sorry. So the framework for data extraction and analysis tools and techniques. Again, we love talking about big data, all this data that's being generated that might have some meaning and relevance, and it doesn't until we take it under control, take it under our wings, and do something with it. Okay, and that's where the data analytics come in. And then if you're dealing with financial data, financial analytics. These are terms that have gained recognition in the financial forensic community. Digital analysis can be used as part of risk assessment, part of testing controls, part of substantive analytical procedures, part of testing of transaction details, and then overall helping us formulate conclusions and opinions. Digital data lends itself well to examinations across time and by time period. Metadata can also contribute significantly to fraud examination and forensic analysis. That's the metadata is fun. That's the stuff that you think no one's going to see, but it's there. For example, and it's caught people up. There's a document being prepared, and it's being sent around between different people, and they're editing it, and they're taking things out and putting things in and making little comments about it, ha ha ha, and hey, let's change the number to this, and and then that comes out with the financial report, and all those little comments and all the edits, all the deletions, all the additions, those you don't see. You see the final product. If you work, do a Word document, right, and you're editing it, then you don't present the final document. You present, with all these edits in there, you present the nice clean document at the end. However, all those edits, all those comments, they don't go away. And I'll give you a little hint. If in any situation where you have edits and things like that, if you've been preparing a document in Word, Do not then, don't make that the final, don't make a Word document what you present, because the metadata is still in there. Rather, convert it to a PDF file, which is essentially a photograph of the clean document. The metadata is not in there, because I know there have been cases of, I'm going to turn my camera on, okay? There have been cases of fraud, and I'm thinking right now of a case where an attorney got disbarred because he and another attorney prepared a brief for a court, and sending it back and forth to each other and making edits and putting in snide comments about the attorneys on the other side and about the judge. And then they were done, okay, sent out the Word document, with showing no edits on it. Again, shows no edits, but they were able to go in and get the metadata that had all those edits and saw I said snide, some really disgusting remarks about opposing counsel and the judge. And those lawyers got their license suspended. Okay. So, first of all, don't do that kind of stuff. Secondly, and again, for example, if you're, sending documents back and forth as to an estimate of the costs or the damages involved, and the numbers are going back and forth, you don't want the other side in a lawsuit seeing the haggling as to the numbers. So convert it to a PDF file, and then you don't have to worry about it. So how many of you knew that already? Show of hands. Anyone? That's one of the beauties of, again, in Word, you print, but you print it to a PDF file, and then you can avoid disclosing that metadata. Good stuff. All right. Ways to disaggregate digital data. Because, you get all this data, you have to, it's all been aggregated. It's all been added together. You want to pull it apart so you can do something with it. So, financial or non-financial, processes, control points, demographic, geographic, business sector, product line, and any other kind of logical manner that you can think of that's relevant to whatever it is you're doing. So, a targeted approach, the examiner should consider more clearly defining the characteristics of the data that should be identified as anomalies. Okay, so think about it, brainstorm with the other people working on your team and say, okay, if we get numbers above this or below that, or look like this, if the numbers, are too, if they're all rounded up or rounded down, seems odd, right? That would seem to suggest an anomaly. The examiner may stratify the preliminary results to identify subgroups that are more likely to be of concern. And then the examiner may determine that a particular data analytics technique is not effective and go back and examine it, analyze it differently. So targeted approach for risk assessment. In an attempt to identify early in an engagement the major concerns and points of focus. Okay, so you got all this data and all this stuff going on. We have to know where to target our efforts. And then scope limitations serve to focus and shape the examination while permitting a deep dive into those particular details that are under examination. Careful consideration of data sources and accuracy will help you shape your examination. Data analytics can also be completed to perform analytical procedures. Anomalies are telling. Anomalies are red flags, and we're going to be looking for those. Okay. Going back, looking for a show of hands here. How many of you are taking classes or taking a class in data analytics? Okay. It's okay. Let me ask a second question. Those of you, all of you, if you've taken auditing classes and you know, okay, how many have come across Benford's? Oh, okay, a few more people. Okay, you lower your hands now. That's good. That's good. Data analytics is big right now, and I was going to encourage anyone, if you can, take a course in data analytics. How many of you have come across Benford's Law? Ah, it's Negrini did a whole, I think he did his PhD dissertation on Benford's Law. If you have time, I'll talk about that at the end. I'm not sure it shows up in these slides. Okay, you have come across Benford's Law, sir. Okay, talk about it in a bit. All right. Okay, so data extraction analysis software functions. So again, all the fun things we can do with our data, and what's nice is you can do all these things in just a matter of, if not seconds, a matter of minutes. Okay, sorting, of course. Okay, record selection and extraction, joining files, multi-file processing, correlation analysis. I mean, just think of what you could do. Correlation analysis, you know, from different files. Let's say there is, we look at the, again, look at a retail situation and we say, okay, on what days do we get the highest amount of returns, and correlate that with our personnel files and, you know, what days certain workers are working. And then you see that there's a high correlation that the most returns are occurring on the day that so-and-so is working. You know, could it be like that woman worked at Best Buy that we saw in the video? You know, is she doing phony returns? Anyhow, verifying multiples of a number, compliance verification, duplicate searches, you know, vertical ratio analysis, horizontal ratio, it should be ratio, not ration analysis, date functions, recalculations, transactions and balances exceeding expectations. You know, recalculations, again, if somebody's forcing the numbers, you recalculate it, and it's so much easier than having to hand add things up. You know? So, example, general ledger analysis examples of data analysis queries. Select specific journal entries for analysis. Okay, so we're going to, you know, test, you know, so we're going to sample certain entries. Okay, we can have our data analytics do the selection process. Create actual to budget comparison reports. Just push a few keys, boom, generated. Analyze and confirm specific ledger accounts for legitimate transaction activity. Speed account reconciliation through specialized account queries. Calculate financial ratios, or all those financial ratios you've been learning in all your classes. You know, set it up so it's just instantaneously calculating those. Calculate percentage comparison ratios between accounts. Prepare custom reports, cash flow, profit loss, asset and liability total reports. Compare summaries by major account in any order, high to low, low to high, whatever. And then create reports in any format, by account, by division, by department, so on and so on. Okay? lovely things that we can do. Accounts receivable example. What can we do with accounts receivable data? Create a list of customers, okay? A customer limit increases and decreases. Age accounts receivable in various kind of formats. Identify gaps in sequential forms, such as invoices. Okay. Like, why are there gaps there? Or why aren't there gaps there? Identify duplicate invoices or customer account number entries. Show specified reports on credits taken by customers. Report customer summaries by invoice, product, and so on. Identify customer activity by age, by product, so on. Compare customer credit limits with current or past balances. I mean, think about some of the frauds we've talked about so far in this semester. Think about the woman at Channel 2 who was running those American Express bills through the second time, but then having the funds put in, applied to her personal American Express account. In a matter of seconds, they could have seen that these invoices for for the same amounts had been paid twice, looking for those duplicate payments. It wasn't until someone from American Express, called up CBS and said, "Hey, this is going on," did they take the time to go back and look it up. But now you can have your IT system just doing it automatically every month, as long as you know what you're looking for. So sales analysis, data analysis queries. Create a report of all system overrides and sales exceptions. Okay. Analyze returns and allowances by store, by department, or other areas, or as I say, by what day certain employees are working. Summarize trends by customer type, by products, by salesperson, and so on. Okay, and again, this stuff can be used also for marketing. If you're looking for trends that certain types of customers are following. Compare ratios of current sales to outstanding receivables or other variables. And generate reports on a correlation between product demand or supply and sales price. You want to know what the good strike price is, what price you should be setting. So you've got that information at your fingertips. Here's some accounts payable examples. Okay. Audit paid invoices for manual comparison with actual invoices. So, and again, if you've got all the images of your invoices there, boom, you just pull it right up. All the documents, all the invoices either came in electronically or you scanned them with their paper documents. You can do that audit so quickly. Summarize large invoices by the amount, the vendor, and so on. Identify debits to expense accounts outside of a set of default accounts. Okay, it's like, why are these debits coming in here, right? Reconcile check registers to disbursements by vendor invoice. Verify vendor 1099 requirements. Do you have to just came, doing my taxes? It's like, did you send a form 1099 to these vendors? Well, no, because I don't really have a business as such. That would need to, or for my business, I didn't get it high enough to do that. Credit vendor detail and summary analysis reports, or rather create a vendor detail and summary analysis report. Review recurring monthly expenses and compare to the posted and paid invoices, and then generate a report on specified vouchers for a manual audit or examination. So again, it can do the sampling. Look for anomalies, select it, and then do that manual examination. Asset management examples. Okay, generate depreciation to cost reports. Compare book and tax depreciation and indicate variances in them. Sort asset values by asset type or dollar amount. Select samples for asset existence verification. In fact, that reminds me, I got an email from the university, and I have to send in a report saying that, yes, I have certain, in my office, I have certain university assets, most notably computers, right? And then what you could do here is say, okay, well, let's select a few of them, and then if Professor Cressy's computer gets selected, let's go down to his office, make sure it's still there, or has he sold it on eBay? Okay. Recalculate expense and reserve amounts using replacement costs. I mean, it's for a guy like me, this is exciting stuff. Knowing that you can do this stuff so easily, when in the past, when I was starting out in my career, this was drudge work. Okay, what about cash disbursements? So summarize your cash disbursements by account, by bank, by department, by vendor, et cetera, et cetera. Verify an audit trail for all disbursements by purchase order, by vendor, by department, and so on. Generate the vendor cash activity summary for analysis, and identify disbursements by department, supervisor approval, or amount limits. Okay, hold on a second. I want to see if I can find something here. Let's see. Okay, one moment. Let's see. All right. Is that one moment, please? I'm just checking on something here. Yeah, I don't have it here. Okay, I thought I had something on here. One moment, please. Stay with me. Stay with me. One more. Guess not. Okay. Okay. I can't find the thing I was looking for, but I got something else instead. Alrighty, moving on. Okay, how about payroll? All right, what can we do with data analytics and payroll? Well, here's some examples of queries. Summarize payroll activity. by specific criteria for review, of course, identify changes to payroll or employee file, compare time card and payroll rates for possible discrepancies. So you've got one file with the payroll rates that the HR department provided you, and then you also have time cards, and you can calculate the rates there, and or the payroll records, and you see a difference. Prepare check amounts, check amount reports for amounts over a certain limit. And again, if you have the HR folks, and so and so is supposed to get paid this amount of money, well, then you calculate and see, who's getting paid more than they're supposed to be getting paid. And then check proper supervisor authorization on payroll disbursements. Lots of lovely things. Okay, while we're at it, let's look at purchasing. Track schedule receipt date versus actual receipt date. Okay, why did it take so long before we got it? Compare vendor performance by summarizing item delivery times and amounts. Isolate purchase order types for analysis, and then analyze all those late shipments. What's going on there? Key issues to address in any of this is the data that you're working with, is it valid? And has it been manipulated? Or is it subject to manipulation? And that goes to data integrity. Data format and structure. Now, fortunately, most of the data analytic tools out there are designed so as to accept the data in various structures, okay? The early tools, it had to fit a certain type of structure, you couldn't use it. Now they're writing it so it any of the, let's say, popular structures in your data are available. Think about the magnitude of the data you're looking at, and what your choices. What is it you're going to look at? Right? That's often the biggest question. All right, what about that software that can extract the data and then analyze it? There's a lot of good apps out there, a lot of good software out there. It's pretty much, at this point, it's pretty much off the shelf as long as you know what it is you need, because it's really not one size fits all. Okay, so you choose the software based on what you need, which is the most appropriate for this current investigation. Two categories of data mining and knowledge discovery software. There's the stuff out there in public domain, shareware or freeware, and then there are specific commercial applications. Depending on who you're working for and who the client is, or if you're working in a company and how much money they have, you might want to bring in some IT professionals and have them design software specifically for your needs. Okay, good old Excel. Amazing stuff, and they keep improving on it. Good old Microsoft Excel. It's a staple. I mean, in fact, there's your Benford's Law right there. Excel is a staple spreadsheet, right? Spreadsheet program, but you can also do some really good analytical work, data analytics with it, and it's also a great presentation tool where you can use Excel to convert it into various types of charts, right? Hopefully you all know how to do that, and as such, because again, we can get into that data and really grind into it. But remember, for forensic accounting especially, you are going to be presenting your analysis to a judge and or jury. And that jury has to try and understand what it is you're talking about. And nothing works better than some nice charts. we see that built into Excel, or at least it lends itself well for running a Benford's Law test. And what I was looking for, I have an example of running a Benford's Law test. I couldn't find it on the files that I have on this laptop. Excel's strengths are its simplicity, and yet it's powerful. But it can only take you so far. If you really want to dig into stuff, you need to get some more powerful tools than Excel. But Excel, don't write it off. It can do real good stuff. So some useful Excel functions. We got a couple of charts here. Write off sum. Yeah. Add up a range of cells. Average, get the mean of a range of cells. Min and max, getting the smallest number or the largest number. Trim function cleans up data when the data cell contains non-relevant information. So it's got other stuff in there, clean it out. Count, of course, gives you the number or the frequency of numerical entries in a range of cells. And counta, the number or frequency of character entries in a range of cells. Good stuff. Other functions. Count if, okay, the number, the frequency of numerical or character entries meeting the designated criteria in a range of cells. So you're looking at some data and you say, that's odd. There seems to be a whole lot of data of exactly, excuse me, I open up my second can of Pepsi here, $9,900. Well, let's see, how many transactions are exactly at $9,900, especially when maybe things need a second approval at $10,000. And then we have len, the number of characters in a single cell. Concatenate, combine data from two cells into one. Days, the number of days between two dates in a spreadsheet. I mean, that one comes in so handy, in any number of applications, or even if you're just, it's like, how many days do I have left before graduation? Well, just put today's date and graduation date in two cells and say, aha, that's, I've got so many days remaining. Network days, number of work days between two dates in a spreadsheet. Squirt, okay, square root of a number in a cell. And then rounds numbers to a specific number of decimal points. All good, and there's a bunch of others out there. And if you become, and I hope you did become a student member of the AICPA, it's free if you're a student. The monthly Journal of Accountancy, online and print, but I'm not sure they have a print anymore. But the online, almost every month they have a article on cool things you can do with Excel. So it's really a very powerful tool. IDEA. Show of hands, how many of you out there have used IDEA? Has anyone used IDEA? Data analysis software. Okay. It is really cool. It's good stuff. Great for use at audits, as is the next one we'll talk about, like the big two. I actually met some of the folks who started IDEA from Texas, I think. IDEA standing for Interactive Data Extraction and Analysis. It's just a generalized audit software. What's nice about IDEA is that it can import data in different file formats. So regardless of what format the database you're going to be looking at has, I shouldn't say what formats, but all the popular formats, you don't have to reconfigure things. It'll do it automatically. It can examine file statistics, observe raw data values underlying those statistics. Again, Benford Law analysis. Can compare and recalculate invoices, and can help manage projects. Good stuff. And I remember like the first tech show they were at, and they were very impressive. And again, like all these softwares that are still around. If they last a few years, they keep making improvements to it. Before IDEA, and kind of working from the same idea as this, is ACL, stands for Audit Control Language. Our friends to the north, Canada, who was developed up in Canada. So get it now before the tariff goes on. Or is there a tariff on Canadian stuff already, I think? Audit analytics and continuous monitoring software. That is kind of the goal we want to get to, where you're not, one of the problems with any kind of, auditing or, analytics is, we might catch it when we get around to doing an audit of it next year. Okay. But if you have continuous auditing, okay, it will alert you that something funny is going on. It can ensure internal controls compliance. And I'll tell you, this is one of the areas of ACL, after the passage of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and also in conjunction with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which apparently is not going to be enforced right now. But they require that you have, effective internal controls. And if you've been running ACL and say something bad happened, and I'll say, say you have a salesperson outside the country who was paying the defense minister bribes. One of the things you're going to be asked is, well, if you're brought up on charges or a suit involving the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, did you comply with the FCPA with regards to having appropriate internal control? And you can say, yeah, but this one, he got away with it. But look, we had ACL that was continuously monitoring. And, so we were doing the best we could. And that will actually help you, at least in the sentencing stage. It can investigate and detect fraudulent activity. Again, continuous auditing, beautiful thing. Independent verification of transactional data, and various uses in a digital environment. Audit analytics. We've been talking about data analytics, audits, analytics, that continuous auditing and monitoring, where it'll, send out a report, shoot up a red flag if something is, looks, to use a technical term, looks hinky. Again, can be used for fraud detection and investigation. Great for regulatory compliance. If you're in a regulated industry, you have to comply with certain things, whether it be pollution monitoring. ACL can help you with that. And again, it can secure data access. Good stuff. All right, module number 4, graphics and graphics software. Yeah. Let's make some pretty pictures, folks. And again, you young people have it so easy because you got all these great tools. Back in my day, we had to draw this stuff by hand sometimes, right? Flow charts with templates. We had to draw these. Again, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That was really what made Apple take off, was the use of icons as opposed to typing in code to get your computer to function. So you just click on a little picture, and do a few things, and boom, it works. So picture is worth 1,000 words. But again, if we're trying to persuade people in court, if you were a juror, which would you prefer? Somebody sitting on a witness stand just reviewing rows of numbers, or a witness with a bunch of PowerPoint slides or charts that they can present you with that shows the data in graphic form? So most PowerPoints, there you go. It's good stuff. Yeah, thank you. Most people are overwhelmed by pages, by page of numbers. Most people, that I don't know about you folks, maybe amongst you are some of you who just love looking at a big old chart full of numbers and can read it. I've encountered, remember there was this one partner at Deloitte. You could give him a huge sheet full of numbers and he could just look at it and then just go through it circling specific numbers, saying we have to check into that one and have to look at that one. He had that kind of mind. Most of us much prefer graphics. So the three roles that graphic software can play in an investigation: as an investigative tool, okay, because sometimes until you see that picture up there, you don't really get a handle on what is going wrong. It can identify the holes. And then, as I was been getting at, it can communicate your findings, your conclusions, and results. So types of graphic software, and these are just a few, okay? Association matrix, link charts, flow diagrams, timelines. Many of you have probably already used things, that result, have been using this type of software. So an association matrix, okay? So you've got some kind of collusion going on. Who's involved? Well, let's identify the players. Identify the linkages between those players. The starting point for reflecting important data is a simplified format. Helps the investigator visually see the important links. So here we have PJ's Pizza. Okay, what do we know about the different people here? Okay, we have Jason. He's getting a divorce. He's a school friend of Stephanie's. He's a golfing buddy with someone else. And there's Stephanie. She's the owner CEO. Mark's our suspect. He's an employee. Richard's an employee. So we start seeing the linkages between them. Okay, with using an association matrix, and this can be, I've seen, and it's funny, they have golfing buddy. I remember seeing one from a case that eventually got prosecuted, and they had all these sort of disparate people that were involved in this scheme. And it turns out that there was a country club that they had in common. One guy, his son was a caddy there. Another guy was a member. A couple of them were members of the country club, but they worked for different companies. Somebody else worked in the pro shop. Somebody else was a groundskeeper. And how these people from different socioeconomic backgrounds and stuff. What did they have in common? Well, it turns out when you put together the association matrix, you go, aha, they all met at this country club doing various things. Anyhow, good, nice software. Links chart, very similar, but more complex than association matrix, but more powerful in that regard as well. It graphically represents important relationships, linkages between people, businesses, and it puts in quotes organizations. I mean, they don't have to be, incorporated businesses. It can be just a loose group of people. Creates a graphic representation of known and suspected associations that are involved in criminal activity. So here we've got Jimmy John Jackson. I look at that. He's involved with the Jack and Jill Hotel in Alexandria, with the Jackson Auto Body in Alexandria, and at JJ's Truck Stop in Alexandria. Aha! That's why they all have J's in their name. Link chart rules. Each person has one link chart symbol and location on the chart. The chart should be developed as simply as possible while remaining accurate. The chart cannot be misleading. Evidence and other documentation should be maintained as backup. I mean, you have to have the backup of the information goes into the chart. Preferably, no linkage lines should cross. Date and important references should be printed on the chart. Should have a legend used to describe the meaning of the different symbols and colors and shapes and lines. And symbols and other aspects of the link chart should be used consistently. So, but when you get it, it really looks cool. Now, most of you have probably seen, okay, well, here's an association matrix converted into a link chart. Okay, so here we have those folks at PJ's Pizza corporate headquarters. Wow, they have 39 stores without fraud, but 15 where there was fraud. Huh? There's fraud going on in 15 different stores. Is this a conspiracy, or is it just happened to have 15, separate frauds being committed? We got Jason. Jason is divorcing Stephanie, the owner. But Jason is friends with Mark and with Richard. Okay, and there's some kind of friendship going on between Mark and Richard, but it's the linkage to Jason that's important. And they were involved with the 15 stores. So maybe the three guys are out colluding against poor Stephanie. Okay, so that's taking that association matrix, converted in, and you get a lot more information looking at that chart, right? Flow diagrams. I think you've all encountered these, have seen these, okay? Analyzes movement of events, activities, commodities, and in so doing, you discover the meaning of activities and the importance to the investigation. So here's accounting and non-financial information flow through books and records. And again, you've seen these. And when you go out and do an audit, you're going to create a flow chart of how the documents flow so as to look for the appropriate, not just documents, how things flow, in order to look for the appropriate internal controls. Excuse me. Back in my day, you had to get all this information and then try to, write it all down and then, get out a little template and draw these charts. Now you just, have the question, you have a questionnaire on your laptop, answer the question, work with the client to fill out the answers, and then you hit that enter key and voila, the software creates the flow chart. Good stuff. So for example, let's look at this here, a kickback scheme. All right. So here's a flow analysis there. So you got the kickback recipient, who's a company employee, who sets up an inflated payable to a merchandise vendor. The company then pays the inflatable third-party invoice of the legitimate supplier. The marketing accomplice at the third-party merchandiser authorizes payment to the kickback recipient. So option one, the third-party merchandiser writes a check to the recipient. Option two, third-party merchandiser writes a check to cash and gives the kickback recipient cash. Or option three, you write a check to a fictitious company that's controlled by the kickback recipient. And if worse comes worse, you always say, he's doing consulting work for us. Yeah, that's what he was doing. Consulting gets blamed for a lot of stuff. Timelines chronologically organize information about events or activities. Helps determine what has or may have occurred and the impact that those actions have had. So here you got Vance sells the Jensen company to Seth. Okay, so here are the patterns of sales contracts. And then we see where the Jensen company is sold to the new owner, Seth, down here. So timelines are particularly good when you have, a number of transactions or activities where people coming in, people going out, people coming back in, people going out. Put it on a timeline and see if it, what patterns emerge. Other graphical formats. Graphics can be a simple, clear, and concise method of presenting case material to communicate outcomes. They can be developed in nearly any manner and for almost any purpose that appears to further the examination. We've got a beautiful graphical software. Some of you have probably used. Show of hands, how many of you have used either Visio or Tableau? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. Well, no, there's a couple of people that say, okay. Um, if you have a chance, even on your own, um, Visio is probably easier. Tableau, a little more powerful. And it, if you have a chance, if you get, especially if you get like a free course somewhere on Tableau, take it, learn it, even if just a beginning class, and then you can stick that on your resume. That impresses people. Okay. Again, Microsoft Visio, simpler, easier to use, user friendly, can be used to create simple as well as complicated diagrams. Okay. Tableau, data visualization tool that enables the user to create interactive visual analytics that are presented using dashboards. Again, if you see somebody offering a Tableau course or a community college sometimes have different courses or whatever, think about taking it, because it looks right now, it looks very impressive on a resume. Okay, case management software. Okay, you're involved in this big fraud examination or forensic case. You got all of this data, all of this graphics you've created, all of this data analytics created, and all this stuff going on, and you got to keep it all straight. Okay, and especially good, especially important if there is a lawsuit pending, because you could be hit with a subpoena, or the other side, if it's if you're battling, the other side will say, we want to see all of the data that they have on this, that, or the other thing, and the judge will order it. And if you can't pull it up and hand it over in a reasonable amount of time, and because I've been there and I've asked for data and they didn't bring it to me, and then you go back to court and go, Your Honor, I want an order that they are barred from using it in court. Oh, that's a good one, because all that work they've done, and they can't use it because they were unable to produce it. Especially if you're getting close to the beginning of a trial, the trial date, you need that stuff, and the court doesn't want to. The judge doesn't want to delay the trial anymore, so you got to produce it in 5 days. You don't make that deadline, then you are not allowed to use it in court because you didn't give the other side time to analyze it themselves. So, got to have good case management software. Again, manages the case data, organizes the case data in a meaningful way, can present the information for use in reports or during testimony. And again, I think I've mentioned, I've been in these, big cases where, the judge has his monitor, the witness box has a monitor, each counsel table has a monitor, and then the jury box may have several monitors. And all of the data, all of the evidence is being presented on screen. And so so you want to call up a document, you just type in the number for it, it gets retrieved, and then the whole courtroom gets to look at it. Can be used to initiate investigation, and two of the better ones out there, and there are others, but these are the two that the authors are going to look at: Analyst Notebook i2 and the LexisNexis Case Map. LexisNexis, many of you may be familiar with it. Lexis is a data base of like every court decision at any time. Okay, and Nexis is came later, which are newspaper and news articles and a bunch of other stuff now. But they also developed CaseMap because they started out in the legal industry with Lexis. So they created this case management software. So Analyst Notebook visualize complex schemes can organize and analyze large volumes of seemingly unrelated data, can bring clarity to complex investigations, schemes, and scenarios, and in doing so, increases management efficiency, evidence management efficiency. Okay, that's really good stuff for conducting your investigation. LexisNexis Case Map becomes the central depository. Okay, it's like the database of your case knowledge, and it organizes information, facts, evidence, documents, people, case issues, and applicable law. Evaluates relationships between different attributes of the case information. And it has within it things like Time Map, which can create those timeline graphics that we talked about a moment ago. Text Map, which is a transcription summary. So you get a transcript of a number of depositions, run it through Text Map, and it'll give you summaries. Note Map can create outlines, and then Dep Prep, which is just a fun title to say. Again, it's for deposition preparation, preparing your witnesses for a deposition. Very important. But if you're like me, you'll have the cases where you prepare that, take a whole day preparing your witness to go into a deposition, and then after the second questionnaire, all your preparation flies out the window and they do their own thing. All right, and there's copyright John Wiley & Son.